Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey, welcome. It's been a crazy afternoon already. I've lost my internet twice, and all my backup networks that I have aren't showing up. It's just going to be one of those days, I guess. Just an FYI, let you guys know that the internet's not being very cooperative today. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming. My name is Charlotte. I'll be your host for the next hour or so. I am also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento. We are 35 strong up and down the state of California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and Hawaii. And we're here to help. That's what we do. We do ghost investigations, and we're nonprofit. We don't charge. We're here to help people, if they think they might have something in their home, or just to teach and inform people about the paranormal. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. Hopefully our guest is here. She confirmed this afternoon, and I'm just waiting on. Hang on a second. On word from her. Let's see. A couple announcements. I just keep the box up. We have 2 spots left open. We have 2 spots left open for the ghost tour, and you can visit our website at californiahauntsradio.com and sign up. I knew the spots were going to go fast, and they have. So the 10 spots, we've got 2 left open. So if you're still interested in attending that ghost hunt, please sign up, because those spots, I'm not expecting those spots to last the rest of the week. Okay. You can also visit my paranormal team at californiahaunts.org. That's where our main website is. There's no updates on there right now because I'm in the process of switching to a new web carrier, which is going to go from Yahoo to Weebly, like the radio site. So I'm in the process of doing that switch. And hang on a second. Let's see who's chit-chat with me. You will be getting a confirmation. It's all good. I know you're there. I'll be getting confirmations out this week. Anyway, again, my internet's really funky today, so I'm just letting you know, and hopefully Kerry can get on. If not, you get to hear me chat some more about ghosties and other things. You never know what's going to happen here. It's been one of the, like I said, it's been one of those days. My internet is not the happiest thing in the world at this point, and yeah, so we're just going to go with it today. But anyway, there's only 2 spots left for that ghost hunt, so if you guys are interested in going, come on over to californiahauntsradio.com and sign up there. You go to the top and go all the way over to, I think it says extras at the top up there, and click on that. It'll take you right into special events. But anyway, welcome. And tonight, hopefully, if Kerry Cassidy comes in, we're going to be talking about a secret space program that the United States has allegedly been running. And and I've been looking forward to talking to somebody about the secret space program for a long time. And so hopefully she comes in. And I'm going to shoot an email over there right now. And in the meantime, what would you guys like to talk about if Kerry doesn't come on? Hang on one second. Just a quick reminder. Okay. Well, if she doesn't get on, then let's think of something we're going to talk about tonight, because there's a lot to talk about ghosts and where they are in this area, in the Northern California area, because unlike the East Coast, it's not as old out here. For everyone that lives out on the East Coast and stuff, you're talking like, it's hot here too. You're talking like really, really old stuff. We're out here, we're probably maybe mid 1800s on up. Especially like we talk about our old Sacramento Underground or our Sacramento area. It's not like it is either in Europe or on the East Coast or anything like that. We don't go back that far. Even like even places like Placerville and Folsom and places like that, they just don't. In Auburn, you're looking at the gold rush time, 1849 and all that stuff. So we really don't go back that far, but there's a lot of energy out there because there's a lot had happened. I mean, we had Civil War battles out there. In fact, in one of the places we investigate, which is a bed and breakfast, which is a B&B up in Placerville. She's got like a dirt berm behind her home. Well, the home itself, the behind, because it's like divided into cottages. There's little cottages on the property, and she's got like a berm back there that divides her property from her neighbor's property. And there's a brook that runs through her property. But when it rains, stuff comes out of that berm, and she has like this display case in her home, down the downstairs part of the B&B part where she lives, and there's a display case in the bathroom, and it's got Civil War stuff in there where she's gotten bullets, and she's found guns, and she's found uniform buttons and all this stuff from the Civil War. So I mean that goes back to the Civil War. If you talk about the Murphy's Hotel, General Grant stayed there. There's even a room at that hotel that's dedicated to him. It's the President Grant suite, but he stayed there when he was a general during the Civil War. So you get a lot of that. Another hotel where there was a lot of Civil War action was, let me think, the one in Volcano. I think it's the Hotel Leger. I do believe it's that. I could be wrong. There's one in Volcano. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But there's one in McCollum Hill, and then there's another one in Volcano. And there was a lot of Civil War stuff around that area too. So you're going to pick that, you're going to get that history with the Civil War. But when you look at places like Placerville and Murphy's and McCollum Hill and Volcano, and all right, there's Kerry, and she's here. So now I can shut up, and I'm going to introduce Kerry Lynn Cassidy, because like I said, I have been dying, excuse my pun, but I've been dying to talk about a secret space program for years. And when I came across Kerry on another show, I was just really tickled to death, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a very, very long time. So, well, you know what? Without further ado, let me see who else is on here. Let's check this out. All right. Okay. Everybody's here. All the usual suspects are online and ready to rock. So let me get Kerry on here.
Hi. Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I've been wondering about this whole secret space project thing, because I've heard stories about it.
Okay.
How did you get involved with all this and and start researching all this stuff?
Oh, well, that's the beginning of Camelot, really. I had been researching it on my own and writing screenplays that I wanted to make into sci-fi movies.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those screenplays, I started out doing research for the screenplays, but eventually I picked up a consumer grade camcorder, decided to make my own UFO documentary. And that's how I got started. And Robert Salas is one of my first people that I interviewed, as well as, let's see, wow, I'm blanking. Oh, Bill Hamilton and Bill Ryan, who ended up to be my partner in Camelot for the first 3 years. And I've been doing this now for 17 years. My dog is getting kind of crazy in the background. I might have to run and do something to quiet her down if she
that's fine.
Makes too much trouble. But so
I've got dogs too. I know what it's like.
So what I'm saying is that I basically started, I picked up the consumer grade camcorder. I went to UFO conferences, and I started going around because I had a background in journalism. I studied journalism in college. I wrote articles and sort of quasi, for those articles, I did interviews. I wasn't conscious of doing anything like this, but then I worked in Hollywood for 19 years trying to get off the ground various projects, and found that I reached a glass ceiling and couldn't really get anywhere without joining sort of the old boys network. And I don't know what it was about me, or, maybe I was just too radical or too whatever. That was a really hard road to go down. So at any rate, I, fast forward to basically partnered up with Bill after I shot a few interviews. Bill was one of them. Sky, stop this. No. she's running up and down the house.
She wants to be on, man, you know?
I don't, yeah, maybe she wants, she senses that there's something fun going on and she wants to be part of it.
Absolutely. I've got two in the hallway. There's two right outside my door, scratching at the door trying to get in here.
It's insane. I mean, she's normally really quiet. Now she's laying down. So maybe that was it. So sorry about that.
No problem.
So I just to get back to the point, I just I started doing interviews, and Bill Ryan was one of them, as I say, and I was making this UFO documentary. That was the point. And then we decided to team up our efforts. He had just been representing what's called the Serpo Project, or serpo.org, I think it is. And that was a human alien exchange program, a la Richard Dreyfuss going on the craft at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Wow.
So that's, you know, and whether or not it's actually happened, it's supposed to have happened for sure. But in fact, we had several of those, apparently, if you go by the information. And it was a defense intelligence agency sort of under their wing. And there was a long saga going along with that. You can read it on I think serpo.org is still out there. So I think you can read it there. But that was the beginning of Camelot, as we both decided that we wanted to get the truth out. And both of us, I don't know, just landed on this idea of interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret, like specializing in that.
Mm-hmm.
I had been researching that area, and Bill had been reading Stephen Greer's book at the time that was out. I hadn't actually read that book, but we both decided we wanted to do that. We wanted to just go for broke, get the truth out, and create a website. And I don't know how we thought we were going to reach whistleblowers, but just put, things out there. And actually it worked out really well. We had incredible success. And I had a small inheritance from my mother. We traveled the world interviewing whistleblowers, mostly from above top secret. And that's what you get in the early days of Camelot. And it's a good thing we did it then, because since then there's been a real crackdown on whistleblowers. So there's very few real whistleblowers out there nowadays. And Snowden and Assange were basically whistleblowers that they, put the lid on, and that was sent a message out to the whole world, really, but definitely to the U.S., stopping whistleblowers from coming forward, thinking they weren't going to get, I guess, blamed or whatever you want to call it.
Right. When you talk about the secret space program, like you say, there's been this exchange thing that's been going on. Who set the deal? I mean, the government set it up. Did the presidents know about all this stuff going on and everything?
Well, I mean, you have to figure out which presidents were read in. And by and large, several of the presidents apparently weren't read in all the way. They might have known a little bit. Nixon knew, and in fact, that's the famous story where he goes. Actually, he knocks on Jackie Gleason's door in Florida late one night, knowing Jackie was a huge fan of UFO stories and all of that, and collected the memorabilia. And he actually took him to an underground base and showed him some alien bodies. And supposedly, Jackie Gleason was never the same after that. So Nixon definitely knew. I think Carter didn't know much. The way they look at the presidency is they only last 4 years, so they don't really have to read them in per se.
Right.
Kennedy knew, obviously. That's part of the reason he got killed, according to my witness, Captain Mark Richards. And who else? I think the Clintons know, and have known, Hillary, very dark side, because the secret space program was run and has been run by the Illuminati, by the secret black magicians and the whole paperclip Nazis. And so it has a dark underbelly that is really it's based on.
Hmm.
Although there are white hats, and that's where you get, what we've got now on the even on surface is
Right.
a group of white hats that came forward during and after the Kennedy assassination, realizing that our government, we had a coup going on, everything was being taken over by these people, and basically, getting together, creating their own secret organization, which has continued to this day and involves Q and where Trump and basically John F. Kennedy Jr. were kind of teamed up and joined. And you can easily see how they would have contacted the son of John F. Kennedy
Absolutely.
to recruit him as part of that. So I'm sure that he joined before the attempt on his life. And so basically the premise is that he's alive. He's still alive.
My question is this: what did they get involved with the aliens for? Was it to keep peace so they didn't, annihilate us with their stuff, or was it just maybe an exchange of, okay, you help us out, we're going to give you technology?
Well, if you're talking about the Serpo Project,
Right.
it depends, because that was one kind of human alien exchange idea that they would come live here and we would go live there. And there's different levels of truth there. Whether the actual Serpo planet is a real planet and so on is, or whether it was like a composite of a lot of several different missions, if you want to call it that, and then turned into a release. They were all just, there was no whistleblower for, overt whistleblower. There was just the DIA releasing these written documents from someone they just called, I think, anonymous, if I remember correctly. And they all came out through this guy who was more or less, I guess you might say, he was if not an agent, he was an asset who had been brought in to do a job. And he had a background teaching English, I think it was, or something, and history. And he was controlled. So the releases were controlled, and Bill Ryan got involved as being interested in that, as having built a website for a rogue, what you call, oh God, what is the name? A rogue organization, a breakaway organization from Scientology called Ron's Org. And then he and someone else, I think it was, released supposedly illegally. They built a huge website for documents. So Bill was very good he's very good with documents. He's very good with, he's a good writer, and he's very organized and in that way. So he volunteered to organize the Serpo documents that were coming out, because it started to be volumes of, pages and pages and pages of releases. So it was all written material. So he was good at that. And so he did it. He volunteered to do it for Serpo. Then he became the only human face on the Serpo story. So he started speaking at conferences. I was reading the releases because we all got, I don't know how it is, but some journalists got recruited, if you will, to join this news group to be able to read those. And I was one of them. Not even sure how I ever got involved. I was just invited. You had to be invited. And so when I saw Bill coming forward and he was volunteering to do that, and so he was the only, person you could talk to, I decided he would be one of my interviews. So I contacted him and arranged, because he was also going to be speaking at this conference that happened every year. The UFO Congress is what it was called, not in Vegas, but in the town near Vegas, whatever that place is called. So anyway, I went there and met him and interviewed him, and we kind of hit it off. He was being interviewed with people with, lights and cameras and camera crews and all this kind of stuff. And I just came up with my little camcorder And at first he wasn't like, he told me he agreed to the interview on email before he ever met me. At first he almost said no, I think because I didn't look like I had anything going on. But I was a film student, so I knew what I was doing more or less.
Mhm.
Plus, as I say, I studied journalism. So I interviewed him. It went really well. The interview did really well. And eventually we traveled. I traveled. My mother passed away. I had a small inheritance. I went with Jordan Maxwell and William Henry on a tour, a group tour of the pyramids, and in search of the signs of Atlantis in Egypt was the sort of, I guess, story behind that tour. And during that tour, I actually interviewed Jordan Maxwell in an interview that he said I could never release because he actually talked about his dealings with aliens to me back then before he'd ever talked to anyone else. So before he came forward. And then after that, because that was back in the early days when people who had, ET experiences and stuff wouldn't talk about it. Like even UFO researchers weren't talking about their own experiences. They were only reporting, the craft.
Mhm.
Everything was about the craft, nuts and bolts, things in the sky. That's it. Sightings, that's where you get Rich Dolan writing, UFOs in the National Security State, Volume 1, back in those days, which was an impressive, piece of work. Then now it's got 3 volumes, I think, maybe even 4, but I think 3. And and I was corresponding with him back in those days and sending him information because I was doing a tremendous amount of research. I was like a maniac. And
So you can hear my guys through the hallway fighting.
I still am when it comes to research. I guess because being a journalist in the early days, I guess I sort of started out with that. So I have those chops, if you want to call it that.
So
I guess.
you talk about this. You talk about how far it goes back with presidents. It makes me wonder, and I don't know if you remember Argosy magazine. Argosy magazine.
I remember the title. I don't really remember so much about the magazine.
Argosy magazine ran a front page photo of aliens on an operating table. And I remember this. I must have been all of about 8 or 9 years old. And you never heard anything else about it.
Oh, really?
I never knew if they were like real photos or fake photos because
well, it might have been the alien interview. I mean,
Yeah, with what you're saying, I mean, this makes more sense that they would run those photos. You know what I mean? Because I never saw the magazine again. They never had anything like that.
I mean, you'd have to research and see whether it was a publication. Must have gone on for, a while. I don't know. I wasn't, I didn't, that's not where I got my information.
Right. I was just wondering because I was, when you were telling me all this just now, it brought that back to me, seeing that in the magazine, because there was talk about what was going on at Area 51 at the time and blah, 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 and all that. And then I was impressed with this stuff even when I was a kid. So, to see that in the magazine, my eyes were bulging, like, oh, wow, there's dissected, the bodies of the aliens are there.
Okay. Well, cool.
Anyway.
I mean, I don't know why I wanted to even do that. I know I was abducted when I was a kid. So I knew a lot just based on that. And maybe, I was visited by aliens. I didn't really remember all that well most of the time, but like there's a couple incidents that I do remember very clearly. I've talked about them before, but just briefly. Once an Andromedan came and talked to me. He sat in a chair next to my bed, even though there was no chair next to my bed, but that's how I saw it. And he was this little bald head man. And right before I was waking up into this reality, I said, wait, where are you from? And he said Andromeda. Wow. And then a few years later, I came across Alex Collier. He described a little old man, balding old man, and he sounded just like the one that sat next to my bed. So I don't have, maybe it's just another Andromedan. Maybe it wasn't the same guy, or maybe it was the same guy, but I was very, I knew right away that Defending Sacred Ground, which is one of Alex's book that he released about the Andromedans, which if you haven't read it, it was free. It's always free online. I think I had it on my website for a long time. It's probably still there. Highly recommended. Great information. Alex is actually back on the circuit. He's been doing some various things. I've been putting some of his stuff that I come across on my Telegram. He's very he spoke at one of my conferences, so we have a whole speech, a presentation of his that's you can watch on Camelot. But that was one of my, so one of my things was an Andromedan. Another time I had I saw a reptilian. I saw a shikar. What's this? A shikar? It's a Draco, the flying. They're called Draco royalty, called shikars. And I was going into meditation. I was wide awake. I tapped into this interdimensional space. I saw this shikar flying by me. I was totally conscious of it. I was conscious that it was a conscious being. It, wanted me to see it. And then I popped back into this reality. At the time when I saw it, I didn't believe reptilians even existed, let alone Draco. I'd heard of them. I'd read about them, but I never, I didn't really know anything. And so after that, I knew for sure they existed.
Interesting.
See, I've had other,
right.
I've had ET experiences, but I also seen lots of UFOs. I mean, I don't think seeing a UFO is a big deal at all.
When I wrote you, I don't know if I wrote you about the incident my friend and I had late one night on the highway, and as we're driving, it's like everything along the side of the highway became a smear. Highway looked like it did back when I was a little kid. The next thing we know, it's an hour later. We're in a town like 10 miles away, parked. So we don't know if we got abducted or what the hell happened, but we know something happened, And I've always had a fascination. Like I was one that I had a very vivid imagination. Always saw things in my room as a kid, and I would see the UFOs like crazy growing up. So who knows, But that's where my fascination for all this comes from. And this program you're talking about, it doesn't surprise me because the government has a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about, But it is at the same time, it's terrifying because, here they're doing this stuff under here, and then they're telling us one thing over here, then they're doing this stuff over here.
Well, I mean, there's some very good series that have been out. I think it's called Dark Skies. Is that the name of it? There's a series that was running actually parallel with X-Files back in those years, in the early part of X-Files, I think it was. And it was called Dark Skies. You can rent it, you can buy it or on Amazon. And it's absolutely worth it because it's closer to the truth than even X-Files, because X-Files tried to make more of a horror show into it. I mean, it had some really good stuff in it, obviously, but Dark Skies, actually, I think that's the name of it, has, really cool stuff and was like closer, a little more mundane, if you will, except that that humans were being taken over by these horrible creatures. So, but it still makes sense today. And then there's the V television series.
Oh my God, yeah. Love V.
And those are as I recall, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory tells me there were two renditions of V.
Right.
Okay, so there was an old one, and then there was one
which was more terrifying,
more modern one. But V is actually really close to the truth. V is where you actually see the reptilians who shapeshift, and we have humans like George Bush that do that, and the Queen and so on. So that's real. But
so
nobody, I mean, it's amazing to me that we live in a world in which they're still in denial about all this. I mean, I've been doing this for 17 years. I don't think I would have thought that I would even get involved in something that took 17 years later and they're still lying about it. I mean, it's just insane.
Well, it is, and it's obvious, people keep catching stuff on film. as far as the UFOs go and all this is going. Look, the Navy caught stuff on film, for God's sakes, and they're still denying it.
Yeah.
It's just it's craziness. So with this project, I mean, how long are we? Who signed us up in the first place to get this ball rolling? Which president?
Well, I mean, I guess, Eisenhower is the famous meeting with the aliens. He met with several of them. There's a surface story that makes the rounds, and there's a more secret one. Apparently, the real secret information is that the first group of aliens our government dealt with is actually these octopus-like beings that were in that. There's a movie that was made not that long ago, maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. And it shows you these octopus-like beings, and they come in a ship, and they're behind a sort of a screen because they're in water kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, apparently those were the first aliens they dealt with. That's, I forget, there's a whistleblower out there that wrote a book and says this in the book. And I think he's real. But after that, the Greys and the Pleiadians came down, apparently, and spoke to Eisenhower, tried to make deals. Now we don't hear whether the reptilians ever dealt with him directly either. Okay. So there could be something else that we don't know.
Right.
But the bottom line is that the deal they made is not with the Pleiadians, who wanted them to agree not to, I guess, not to progress in their nuclear plans or whatever, and somehow limit their technology or something. And our government and Eisenhower refused to do so. So they sided with the side that would give them technology in exchange for signing these agreements where they could abduct and experiment on humans. But it was supposed to be a limited number of humans. Little did they know that, of course, the Greys, they eat us, they feed on us in all these different ways. And this is where you get the adrenochrome and et cetera, et cetera. So they just broke the treaty. Like, a couple years later, Dan Burish talks about this. I think the Tau 9 is one of the treaties later on that they have meetings. People don't realize this, but actually, according to one of my top witnesses, which is Captain Mark Richards, and Dan Burish years ago, here on Earth, they actually have meetings with groups of aliens, a United Nations kind of meeting. And the United Nations that we know of is supposedly part of it, but it's a very secret part of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And they go to places like, I think one of their common areas it's Peru, I think it is. And then Exeter in England. Those are two of the sites where they meet. And so periodically they have sort of, you might call it galactic, whatever they call that, what am I trying to say? It's just a kind of a galactic meeting with these aliens and so on. And interestingly enough, one of the participants is, I know this sounds insane, but I don't understand how it works, but is Saturn. It's like a being that is the planet Saturn. So, and that's like a really important, they can't have the meeting unless Saturn is there. Now, I don't know if that's always the case or if that's just occasionally the case, but that's one of the important members of these, meetings.
What strikes me too with this is that, like you say, the treaties were broken. Obviously, I mean, you're playing with fire. I mean, what could they possibly be thinking to go into a treaty with beings that have so much better technology than we do, and they can annihilate us like boom? You know what I mean? I mean, they're not going to play fair. It doesn't matter if you have a treaty,
right? Well, knowing okay, so the plan, according to our secret space program, what they say now is that back in those days, what they figured out, and this is, I don't know if it actually happened in this way, It certainly happened, but whether it happened in this chronology, I don't know. But they decided that they wanted the technology of the ETs, whoever they were, regardless of the races. So the way they would get the technology was to make deals with them, go along with what they were asking, knowing that they had better technology in the interim. But once we got the technology, then we went into building our own of everything. And then you should listen to the interview, if you haven't already, that with William Tompkins, where he goes into how the secret space program worked with the paperclip scientists, but also how the beings from Aldebaran contacted Germany, decided to give them the technology during World War II, told them not to use it to win the war. Right. I guess knowing what I know now about history, right? So I'd say, yeah, don't win that war, but you're going to win a war later with it. But the bottom line is that they were actually involved in our space program, sabotaging it from time to time. So they would slow us down. The Pleiadians were helping us a lot. And that's the main part of Tompkins' testimony. And there are other races, I'm sure, that have helped us as well. So they did achieve this, however. So we now are at a different footing with most alien races, per se.
Okay.
This is how the story goes.
That explains a lot about Germany during World War II, and the fact when or even during our space race, when we decided we wanted to go to the moon, and all this was going on, and the Germans had the best scientists.
Yeah.
For all that stuff. I mean, if they were working if they were working directly with those aliens ahead of us, just like they had the first jet.
Right. Yes. I mean, for some reason, they chose Germany because I think because their genetics were also closer to them, because they are actually said to be more or less fascist. Their organization, of the beings from Aldebaran is, and they also, I think, well, at least how they display themselves is like your typical Nazi, the ideal Nazi, blonde, blue-eyed, whatever kind of thing. Now, whether they really look like that or really look more reptilian is not clear. There's reason to believe that they're reptilian human hybrid type things, or reptilian humanoid hybrids, not necessarily human. So, and they, by the way, have made a deal with our government, according to, I think I can say this, it was on the front of Veterans Today. Gordon Duff is a really strange cat. He's the editor of Veterans Today. He's a CIA agent, which he hates me saying, but he is. And it's the whole place is run by CIA, that whole thing. And this is years ago. He actually just came out and said, that our government had made a deal with a group from Aldebaran to give them parts of Africa and to settle in exchange for us being able to colonize a planet off, out in the solar system that belonged to them. And the idea was the event. There's a movie, a TV series that's like, I don't know, a 5-part or 6-part series. It doesn't go on for tons of episodes, but it's called The Event. It was on television, years ago. You can watch it. It's either on Amazon or Netflix or both. You can also buy it. Highly recommended, again, because it details the kind of issues that we have and the secret space program made a deal in which other governments of other countries around the world just had to live with it. They have no choice. They have to be quiet about it, and they have to live with it. So, so that's, really interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, this is all fascinating. I'm just looking at comments, and everybody's commenting how fascinating all this is. It's incredible, that this has gone on. Right. And I don't want to sound like a like you've been talking about TV series, American Horror Story last season just did this.
Did what?
The secret space program.
Really?
Yeah,
In a
they had
horror
Austin Powers
series?
making the deal with the aliens, and whoever
Oh,
did their
really?
research, yeah, and whoever did the research because they were doing it, they were doing it to get the technology, and it was for breeding purposes, to do a hybrid.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about the octopus people, some of the babies that came out because they were trying to have a more human looking baby, obviously for the hybrid. Some of the babies that came out had tentacles.
Oh, all right. Well, they kind of mixed and matched the
Well, yeah,
storyline, I guess.
but I'm just saying it was something similar to what you're talking
Well, the
about.
gray human hybrid story is very well known, and they've been very successful at that. So the grays that we made deals with
Right.
continue, and even to this day, do abduct people all the time.
Uh-huh.
And they did concentrate, however, in South America. So eventually, our government, and this information comes from a variety of places. Most people don't know this information that I'm saying. They know it maybe because I've said it, but they didn't know about it. Basically, I get information in very kind of weird ways sometimes because I'm a psychic intuitive. So sometimes I'll get a download and it'll tell me where to look, and then I'll find the information. So I try to verify what I get intuitively, and then it turns out correct, or somehow it'll crop up somewhere. So the idea here was that they they were abducting people in the United States, and that was getting very sort of too much, embarrassing, easy to spot type of, too many stories coming out. So they actually sent them down to South America, Central and Latin America. And they were willing to do it because what they really wanted was not like a mixture, what's already a hybrid. We're already hybrids here in the North American area, mostly. But the Latinos, and especially if they're close to the root race, which is the Native Americans, so they are more like a root race, and it's kind of like the same premise of genetic engineering a plant. They look for the indigenous, really strong, roots that hasn't already been, sparsed out in terms of genetics, right? It's not already a hybrid. So you don't want one hybrid you don't want to make a hybrid from another hybrid. You want to make a hybrid from your race and the root race. And then so that's where the gray human hybrid program really took off and continues to this day. And that's why you get a sky full of UFOs down in you've seen the videos, right? I've gone to conferences and seen the real footage. Jaime Maussan talks about it. There's other, famous ufologists that have brought that information forward, and the sky is just filled with UFOs. I mean, just incredible amounts, which you don't see. They don't have apparently their deal with the U.S. is not to do that. So also consequently, people from Central America and South America will probably be a lot more open to the whole ET abduction scenario, take it very, in stride and so on. Whereas in our country, you see one UFO, you're making a big deal, which is kind of laughable.
Well, my question with this is, you talked about higher ups like the Illuminati and stuff being involved with all this. Are any of them hybrids?
Oh, they're definitely hybrids. In other words, they're reptilian human hybrids, some of them. And like the Bush family, for example, having a high degree of reptilian DNA, which apparently I've heard that this was the case and is the case, that bloodline. And that goes for, I believe, the Queen and certain other groups, possibly the Khazarians, because they're, again, when you get the proclivity for child sacrifice, drinking blood, the whole adrenochrome highway thing, torture, because they like to torture their victims, that's all completely reptilian. That's that's where the humans get it. It's not humans that are actually doing that.
Hmm.
They're humans with a large degree of reptilian DNA. And we have been invaded and obviously hybridized. Now, that goes back. I mean, I was just, Ashiana Dean, the Voyager books, she's one of the best sources on this information, as well as everything that's happened on planet Earth, in terms of the various races, the war of worlds that's gone on both on surface, in inner Earth, and out in interdimensional, and so on. So in those stories, when you start reading all the different races, it's insane how many times humans have been genetically re-engineered. And by the way, this latest, I don't know, is it okay to say the C word or the CV word or whatever they try to censor, when I say, the jabs, that
Yeah.
that's a genetic re-engineering of the human of the human genome again. Okay.
Wow.
Right in your faces, in which you volunteered for it.
Right.
This is how insane it is.
Right.
So, and some people would say that actually humans do volunteer to be abducted, to be hybridized, and have their genetics changed on purpose, as part of their experience of the universe, of the multiverse. So it's just kind of what you do. And different races again have different ET strains within them, and that's why we all look so different, and how people, you can see, like, you can really go down the gamut, but people that look more like dogs, or people that look more like cats, and so on. It kind of goes on like that. So there are these original kind of prototype beings, and then out of that you get the humanoids and the humans, and so on. And it goes about 200, I think they said the entire megaverse goes back 550 billion years or something like that. I don't have the exact number. And then she said, but this seeding and this sort of part of the universe, or whatever, megaverse, or whatever hologram, if you want to call it that, goes back 250 billion years. So humans have started on Lyra, the humans. And there's also, the Pleiadians are humanoid. So we're also Pleiadian. We're a mixture, again, of races, a lot of us, depending on which, group you're related to. And those are the ones that contact you, by the way. So people that are having contact, lots of times your contact is from a related race, except in the case of abductions, where the gray ETs, and sometimes the gray ETs are working for some of the races. So Mark Richards says that the grays go out to the highest bidder, so they'll work for anyone, and they're just like worker bees, basically. Now some are fairly intelligent, but some are actually, they're just AI intelligent. So they're dumb in some ways, the way AI might be dumb, and that's why, I don't know if you read the David Jacobs books.
Oh, yes.
David Jacobs is a really excellent author who talks about the gray human hybrid program in detail. And he talks about when, after they get a baby from a human female and then put gray DNA into it, then the young being has to be trained to live among humans on Earth. And so certain humans are elected to be their trainers, so to speak. And in some cases they live with them. And he details all of that quite well. And there have been incidents in which members of the military have maybe rescued a young ET or whatever, a hybrid, and then had them live with them as their son or daughter kind of thing, even knowing that they were a hybrid, gray hybrid, human hybrid. The trouble with the gray, in my view, with the gray human hybrids is that because the grays favored intellect over the rest of their the genome, and so they became almost like similar to robots, but they lost their body fat. Apparently, they lost all their, their physicality. They didn't value emotions, and so it shows up in their physicality and so on. That's how the story goes. But and they tried to rectify that. In fact, Dan Burish was trying to help a certain group of gray, sort of ETs. It's a little bit different strain, but nonetheless help them to rectify the imbalance in their genome by getting human, DNA and injecting it into them and changing them. So he was part of that program.
This is all just so fascinating to me that this actually is going on, and nobody realizes it. Makes you wonder, like Marisa in the chat room mentioned, those missing 411 cases, people disappearing in the woods and stuff.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. Some of those, I was just talking on another interview that I just did. Actually, I talked about CERN because, I've been doing this for so long that I have this like library in my head now. And certain things will stimulate me to bring, a piece of information forward. So recently I was just remembering how Mark Richards had said that CERN is actually one of their main tasks is to hold open a wormhole between CERN between CERN and the Draco galaxy, so that the reptilians can drive their ships through, because you need a special kind of wormhole stargate to allow for that. And so then they come in here and they go to places like any war-torn area like Syria, Iraq, and they pick up the humans under the fog of war, and they take them off planet and they sell them, use them as slaves, etc. So this is a very common practice, apparently been going on forever. And so CERN is heavily involved in that.
It's just incredible that, like you say, this goes back pretty far in our history, to have this stuff happening. What did they, when you think about like the ancient Egyptians and stuff and all that, we were really primitive back then. So I wonder how the negotiations went back then.
Well, actually, I lead tours of Egypt, and I haven't been able to go for the last 2 years, but almost every year I go to Egypt. I was going to Egypt, and myself and Maria Wheatley, she's a Druid who has studied a lot of those ancient arts. And so she has her areas of expertise. I have mine. And then we have a local guide who knows us well and contributes the song and dance that they have to tell you, which a lot of it is not true. So, but it's still interesting to hear. So what happens is, as I've been going, I've been learning more and more, and I get downloads, and I have a lot of Egyptian memories. I even have had Egyptians tell me that I'm Egyptian, which is funny. But so now when I go to the temples and the various spots and start lecturing the group, then they're called the guides or the watchers. They're not the police, but they're the guides or the watchers, and they just live in kind of every day. They like go to work in the temple. They're just there. They're watching. I don't even know what they all do, but they're teaching. They do teach, like the locals and things like that. But they come and stand next to me when I'm talking, and then they nod and give me their approval because they like what I'm saying. Because I talk about the Anunnaki and the things that, regular people don't talk about there in Egypt. So one of the things I've also noticed is that I discovered that there seems to be a level of programming, of repetition. When you get a lot of repetition, it's akin to programming, just like advertisements we watch on TV or whatever it happens to be. So when you see that, at least for me, my suspicion was raised, and I saw that in the Valley of the Kings. is that these cookie cutter, beautiful, what they look like, they're like drawings on the side, inside these tombs. But in reality, I think they're actually, they're programmed stories that are not as accurate as they used to be. And I think they've actually changed them over time, and they haven't told people, and they've edited out certain things they don't want people to see, and so on. So I became quite suspicious of what is being on display in Egypt and what is being hidden, and starting to see between the different, being able to separate those out. So, yeah, but I mean, Egypt is a very fascinating, it's evidence, it has links to Atlantis, of course, as does Antarctica and so on.
It is interesting, and like you go back and like the gentleman that wrote Chariots of the Gods, for instance, and you see those those inscriptions with the guy in the
Eric
space,
von Daniken.
Eric von Daniken. You see the pictures of something sitting there in what looks like a spacesuit. It's fascinating.
Oh yeah, they had the light bulbs. They had all kinds of stuff. Absolutely. I mean, they had all kinds of very sophisticated medicine, and I mean, you know, if anything, civilizations, well, they start and they blossom, and they have incredible knowledge. Library of Alexandria indication, where they took a lot of the knowledge underground. They burned the library, but they took everything over to the Vatican. It's still there underground in the Vatican, under the control of reptilians who run the Vatican. And people go and, worship them and kiss the ground they walk on, and they're basically worshiping reptilians. It's insane. And I'll also say that I was told by a Hopi that their god was a reptilian.
Really?
Yeah. So they were reporting to reptilians as well. I mean, it's insane. Our history is, it's not as pretty as you might like it to be. It's not all blonde, humanoid aliens, so to speak.
You always hear, but when you talk to other like UFO people, that have been abducted, or people that are so-called experts in it, they always make the reptilians out to be just horrible, horrible, horrible to deal with, as opposed to the Greys. So to hear that
they do or they don't make them out to, I don't know, what are you saying?
Well, some some of them feel that the reptilians are the ones that you should be afraid of.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of them will say, well, the Greys are really nice to deal with and all this, but you tend to hear more about the Greys than you do the reptilians.
Well, yeah, it depends what era you're talking about, and which group of people. But it's, a lot of times people that are abducted will deal with more than one group of aliens, and sometimes you get rescued from one group by another. Okay. And Ashiana Dean, that's part of her history. Actually, she was being abducted by, it was the Greys, and then she was rescued by the Guardian races. One, but which one I don't know. Might have been the Pleiadians. I'm not sure. And I think something like that might have happened to me as well, because you graduate, like you're dealing with certain levels. I know that. I have had a lot of dealings with aliens in my life. That's why I know so much about them. Mm-hmm. And I really, I feel, I know it's, I'm not trying to sound egotistical. I just feel like, one of the things that made me do the job I do is that I was assigned to do it, and that I get help all the time from various races. I'm like an ambassador, like a go-between between the aliens and the humans. And so, people have even said to us, when we were doing Camelot, we did a television show. And one of the things they wanted us to do during it was, a follow up to the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. We did one for the same organization, True TV. The CIA came in and made our producer an offer he wasn't supposed to refuse, which was that they would take over our show and we would go to series and so, but they would run it. And he said no. So then they basically fired him. They fired our director. They repackaged the project. They took it, then it was put on the shelf for 2 years or something. Then it finally aired. Now we have a copy of it, and it is on my website, and it's called Shadow Operations. And it's all about our witnesses, Camelot witnesses, to do with Mars. And then they also added a few of their own, the television network witnesses. That's a whole saga in itself. But so what was I saying? So, yeah, I mean, this, what goes on with these different races, it's just that I know so they said to us in the series, look surprised when you hear this information. And that was very difficult. And so there's one frame where I'm going, like making a face, and the face had nothing to do with being surprised, but they took the frame and they put it into the series in a certain place so that we would look surprised, because as it happened, I haven't been very surprised by anything, and that's just because of my past, that I believe is very sort of still, it's not always in my mind. It's just that I can easily go there.
I have 2 questions in the chat room. How many alien races are there?
A zillions. How many stars are there?
Wow.
There are, I mean, I say to people, why limit the imagination of God? Because people like to say, oh, well, humans are made in the image of God, and there's only, they're the only ones in touch with God. But God is everything, right?
Right.
Okay. Right. So, hello. Back in the day, if you want to know which ones are known, like on Earth, to be dealing with us, in the early days, Clifford Stone was asked that. He was an alien human communicator, basically. So he used to go to crash retrievals and, as an intuitive, try to, communicate. A little like what I guess I feel like I do, but I never did that, as far as I know. But he said there was 57 back in those days. So that was 17, that was well, it's not 17, maybe 14, 15 years ago. But it's just like how many are finding us, how many races are finding us. That's part of the reason why, by the way, contactees, abductees are totally surveilled by the secret space program. Because the ETs that do come here a lot of times don't want to deal with our government. They want to deal with just individuals. So they'll, contact you, and if they find, I think it's like, it's your light signature. If they find one that they think they can communicate with, then they'll, show up for that person. So, so that's how it's been throughout history. And the governments know this. And so anyone that gets a lot of contact, it also, I think it changes your frequency and your signature, so to speak, that you can be seen from space with certain technology. And so then they watch that person very closely, because they need to know, or they feel they need to know, who's coming and going and how they're getting in. And that's where, Solar Warden came along, for them to guard the various craft that come in and out and go, leave and go from our galaxy. So they monitor all of that. But they can't keep complete control, because if you go interdimensional and then you pop into this dimension, and you can, a lot of craft will use storms to do that. And some won't even use craft. If they're high enough vibration, they can just, sort of like teleport, if you want to call it that. I don't think it's literally teleporting. It's probably another version of that, but they can just show up in your living room standing there, kind of thing. They don't have to have a craft. But that would be, 6-dimensional and above, at least, I think, is the ones that do that. The other ones, the 4D, which is the grays and the reptilians and some of the lower vibrational beings, and some of those are actually more in the negative path, so to speak. They use craft. So being so, excited and about the craft, that's, you're really dealing, in most cases, you're dealing a lot of times with beings that are, they're operating out of self-interest, first of all.
Sure.
Now, what we consider negative is someone who isn't our friend. Well, that's not quite an accurate way of of categorizing a whole race of beings.
Right.
Just because they're not, it's kind of like if you had friends and somebody doesn't like you, then categorizing them as negative. Well, they're negative to you because of what you represent, or something about you. Maybe you're alien DNA that they don't like, because we have, natural proclivity. It's in us. We're very, as above, so below, and we're related. We come from the stars, and we are not descended from apes. That's a lie. We are actually, we come, like I said, from Lyra. Initially, we were breatharians. We had, a whole different kind of look about us. We are more, as you go into ascending, you kind of move into this area again. We were taller, thinner, so and so. Then the more we got into the earth density, I guess the race sort of getting shorter, and so like that. But there are some races that are more related to at least the Yeti. They're that kind of being. And then also there may be some more root races but they still, I don't think they're, in other words, what you call chimpanzees and gorillas and all those, they're like a step down from us.
Okay.
Not the other way around, if you understand.
Okay. Another question is, what do you think of Scientology?
What
What do you think of Scientology?
That's a mixed bag. I'm not a big fan of it. In fact, that was part of the reason Bill and I ended up splitting up our operations. Some real psychotic stuff in there. What can I say? But at the other hand, Ron Hubbard was, he was Navy intelligence, first of all, and he was quite advanced intellectually, and he knew all about a lot of our history dealing with aliens. I don't know if he himself had direct dealings, because I don't know too much of their background history. I know some. I know that a lot of people in the CIA are Scientologists. They've been trained to be. I think it's okay to say who they are. I mean, Hal Puthoff. I think George. I think Green, Christopher Green, and God, lots of these people have trained themselves in various techniques, because one of the things is he created a lot of sort of sci-tech, that not sci-tech in the natural sense, but sci-tech using technical, like this monitor thing, whatever they call it. They constantly monitor their physiological, you hold on to these things, these sort of like whatever they call them, cans or whatever. Right. And then it reads your whether you're sweating or your heart rate increases when you're asked a question, all that kind of stuff. So they do that thing called monitoring. And I mean, it turned into it's really diabolical. I mean, because again, whenever you try to slice and dice humans and categorize them, and then a huge part of Scientology is basically manipulating you, but also training you to manipulate yourself, like mind control in essence. So it may be just as good as the person using it. You could possibly say that. It has a very strong, there's actually 3 main players back in those days, okay, that are innovators in this, in the area of sci-tech and the whole sort of MK Ultra mind control, and then taking it a step further than, say, the Nazis did. And that is L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, and Aleister Crowley. Okay. So that those 3 guys who knew each other kind of borrowed from each other as well, and came from different directions. Crowley and Parsons were more into the occult in ways that L. Ron Hubbard tried to bring quasi science, what we think of as science. Yeah, the way the pharmaceutical companies use science, to manipulate us and do what they do. In other words, it's kind of a different approach, which is part of the reason I don't like it. I would say, if you want to say it this way, you could say Scientology is left brain, okay, more left brain, whereas Parsons and Crowley are more right brain. Okay, so they're more the spiritual, although people would say, satanic, spiritual, that dichotomy, but nonetheless. So, but all three were innovators at a key time in the early, I guess it was around the 1950s, 1960s, at a time when we were also being visited by a lot of aliens, and the secret space program was growing up. And so it's kind of like a lot of things went into that mix. But a lot of people don't realize that those three guys were actually innovators. And so if you can get past, part of the thing with Crowley is that, because I did read books about him, and one thing I found is that he was actually a jokester on many levels. So he would pretend to be much worse than he was, a lot, because he thought it was funny, because he liked deceiving people and he liked making fun of how small-minded they were. So he would pretend to be this incredibly horrible individual, but he actually wrote some very enlightened work. So, you'd have to study it to see what I'm talking about. But, this may upset some people out there, I realize, but you can study the, printed word. Doesn't mean you're a Satanist. You have to study. The reason I studied is because I decided at a young age I was going to study the enemy. I knew they were Satanists. I understood at a very young age all about that. So I just decided I was going to figure out what the hell they were on about, what they were doing when they performed magic, with a K at the end, and so on. And so that's why, that served me incredibly well when I got into Camelot, because a lot of ufologists, they come from, they're like, I call them white lighters. It's sort of and light workers, as opposed to light warriors. So they're worker bees. So they, they like to think, pie in the sky and everything was going to be wonderful. And, they're telling you all this stuff, and they don't want to look at the negative. They look away from the negative. They're not, whatever, they're not constructed to, it's kind of, sorry to say, a little bit of the Democrat Republican split. The Democrats just want to live in fairyland in a certain way. But you have to look at both sides. And unfortunately, they end up, see, if you try to look away from the negative, you tend to attract it.
Right.
It's kind of like that dichotomy. So these are the laws of the universe. Okay. I'm not, this is not my laws. This is just the way it's constructed. So reality, what we call reality, is a system of polarities and so on and so forth. But if you don't ever study sort of the enemy and these ways, reading these ways and understanding the occult and from a deeper level, and using your intuitive abilities and training yourself in these ways, you're never going to really get what's going on.
Absolutely. The other question is there similarities with communication with the dead and communicating with aliens?
I mean, I have communicated with the dead, as you're calling them, ghosts and all of that, discarnate entities, whatever. And, I have actually woken up from a sound sleep, yelling my head off, going, get out to these beings, because I had so many beings in my room and I just didn't want them there, and there's, when you're so you become like, we're an antenna, right? So if you're really a sensitive antenna, they see you, they sense you, and they will mess with you. They'll try to interact with you in whatever way they want. And that can kind of mess with your head if you aren't, lodged in reality. It can just, screw with you. So, so it behooves you to learn as much as possible about these different things. But in answer to the question, in some ways, you can say, I mean, communicating with humans is like that. You're just, communicating with anything. You communicate with your dog the same way. You communicate with, from the point of view of a magician, or I like to say a witch or a warlock, right? A good witch. Then you can see that everything, it's a sensate universe. Everything is alive. Everything is energy. This table is in energy. It's just slowed down energy. Okay. It's still molecules. It still has a kind of a residual or remedial consciousness. Same with the wall, same with everything. So we humans have the ability to communicate with everything. We're communicators, we're creators, as does God, right? So, and these various alien races have these same abilities to communicate. And so we communicate like we send a picture into somebody. I mean, I know that my dog reads my mind. She looks, if I have an image in my mind, she'll know exactly what we're going to do that day or where I'm headed, or, sometimes I have to be careful not to like think of certain things, because then she'll come over and want to go there and do it. Right. Whereas I'm just thinking about it. Right. But so, yeah, she reads my mind. I had lots of indications in that way. So it's like that.
Okay, cool. Wow, this hour blew by. I have learned so much. I could talk to you for hours. It's just so fascinating.
Yeah, I think so. It is fascinating. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy, if you ask good questions, you ask good questions, and you obviously have a lot of knowledge yourself. I can tell. So it's fun. It's fun talking to you. Maybe you want to come and do an interview on my show sometime, because you're doing a unusual radio show, right?
Yeah, I would love to. We can
Okay.
do that. We can set that up. I'd like to have you on again too. I mean,
All right.
we could go for hours on this stuff, because I mean, I've done a lot of research, into this stuff since I was a kid. So
Great.
it's just something that really interests me, like the Mars program. I know a little bit about that too. Which we
Sure.
didn't get into, but I know a little bit about what was happening there
Yeah,
too.
no, it's, there's a ton of stuff to go over and discuss and bring forward. And I think it's great to have discussions about it. So
Absolutely. All righty. Well, thank you so much. How can people find you?
go to projectcamelotportal.com. That's my website. You can also go to projectcamelot.tv. Takes you the same place. And so does projectcamelot.org. We have 3 URLs all go to the same place because we're banned in certain countries like Germany. So we decided to create some different URLs in hopes of getting past the censors. Everything that I do is on my website, especially since the last 2 years I got banned from everything, including YouTube. They deleted my entire channel. I think it was a year ago. And now they've suddenly given it back. They had to, because they actually went to court and someone sued them, and they've quietly been giving people back their channels. In my case, my channel was over. They didn't give back everything, but I think I have around 900 videos on there now. My real number of videos is higher than that. But the rest of the videos, especially the ones I made over the last 2 years, are either in the membership area of Camelot, or they're also on Odyssey and also on Rumble. So I put a lot of videos out, especially recent ones I use. So now I'm posting them 3 places, as well as my website. And my website is not the easiest thing to navigate, but you can certainly see the most recent stuff on the front page. And our front page is quite big, quite long. And I write articles all the time. So I don't just do shows. I also write articles because I was a journalist, right? And I, so I still do interviews. I do about 3 shows a week on average, either an interview or I'm being interviewed. So it depends what, happens that week.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be glad to be on your show. I have no problem with that.
Okay. That'd be fun. Cause
you have a book out, right?
Sorry?
You also have a book out.
Yes. It's called Rebel Gene. And actually, well, I could actually, I think it'd be easier. Do we have enough time that I just show you my website really quick?
Sure. And I
Okay.
can show them the book too.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a picture.
Right there. There it is.
That because a picture is worth 1,000. Oh, well, you've got it. Okay, so that's
I
fine.
got you covered.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. But I'll. Yeah, that's my book. It took me about 3 years to write because I tried to pack into it more or less a lot of an overview of everything that I'd been, all the people I'd interviewed for 17 years. So a lot of the knowledge is kind of compact into that to make it, you might say, a handbook, a kind of a handbook for negotiating reality or realities. So yeah, it's fun.
Okay, cool. Well, I
And
want to thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I would love to set up another time to get you on to talk more because I mean, there's so much more to cover.
okay, sure.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Cool.
you.
All right. You have a great evening. Okay.
Okay, you too. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. All right. That was great. Learned a lot. Learned a lot about those projects. I mean, there's the Mars thing that's going on that I don't want to talk about because if I get her back on, we can certainly talk about that. Right. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for coming tonight. Got a little bit of a late start, but that's okay. Life goes on. My dog decided to have an argument. I don't know what she's yelling at. Probably my cat's out there. But tomorrow we're kind of shifting gears. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a near-death experience. Rose Ringer, uh, after her husband passed away, I believe after her husband passed away, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she went to the doctor, started to look at chemo and different things, and she literally died on the operating table. Had an NDE. Well, I guess what happened during this NDE was that she was told that she was going to be brought back and she was going to be completely cured. And that seems to be what happened when she came back. She was completely cured of everything. So she's going to tell us her story tomorrow and what she did with this, because I mean, you just don't come back and not be thankful and want to help people and stuff. So she's going to be with us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Okay? Same time like we're always on. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everybody that was in the chat room tonight asking questions, you know, observing and stuff. Maybe I'll get on this gal's show. It'd be kind of fun to get on her show, because I know a lot about this stuff. I met a guy years ago in Placerville that I was actually had on my show, had on the Blog Talk show, who spoke of this stuff, and he taught, and I thought it was hilarious at the time, because I was a non-believer back then, because he told me that there were like real Star Wars going on up above us with all these alien races, and I just kind of went, yeah, okay, whatever, dude. But the more that has come out over the past few years, the more I become a believer. So yeah, we can take it for what it's worth. Anyway, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. If you're watching from YouTube, please click on the little ghost guy with the Sherlock Holmes hat on, the magnifying glass, because that'll make you a subscriber. We've got more than 200 videos out there of different shows, and we're going to bring even more shows. We just keep pumping. All right. Radio website is californiahauntsradio.org. You see the ticker tape thing at the bottom of the page? Well, that's because technically California Haunts is a nonprofit. And so everything you see here, mics, cameras, action, all comes out of my pocket. So if something breaks, like I just ordered headphones, headphone wires, that all comes out of my money. So I need help. I need help keeping this thing on the air because I love bringing it to you as a journalist, photojournalist. I love doing this stuff. So if you could donate a little bit at paypal.me at California Haunts, that would be great. Or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, we have a Venmo, and that's just type, go to Venmo and then type in California Haunts. But that would be great. I would really appreciate it. In the meantime, I will see you tomorrow. And I'm going to go ahead and run her website for you so you can find it, because I know a lot of you guys are going to, first thing you're going to do is head to her website. So let's do that first, and then I will see you tomorrow. So there you go. ProjectCamelotPortal.com is the website. That's me making the that's not a ghosty. And of course, the book is Rebel Gene. And that is by Kerry Cassidy. And you can get the book at Amazon.com. And again, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30. Bye.